With the latest speculation around James Harden, Daryl Morey, and just the Philadelphia 76ers just kind of dropping the ball in several places, is it now time for Joel Embiid on the move? Let's talk about it. Listen, if you're new to the channel, it's your boy P.kidd. This is P.kidd Talks NBA. Y'all know what y'all clicked on. Y'all know why they can't. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about Joel Embiid. Now, this is all coming on the cusp of Joel Embiid removing Philadelphia from his Twitter profile. Now, mind you, I am of the generation that was like slightly before social media took over the world. So to me, it was one of those things that really, like, back in the day, probably wouldn't have been. I say back in the day like I'm old. But back in the day, it wouldn't have been a big deal. Like, oh, well, he didn't have Philadelphia in his bio. Well, who cares, right? But in today's age of social media just dominating everything, this is normally where there's smoke, there's fire. And this has been the case for the last, let's say, decade, where if you see a disgruntled player, or a player that may be weighing his options, he starts to distance himself from the organization that he's on. One of the main ways they do that, social media. And so at this point, that's what we're starting to see. And it doesn't come to a surprise. It really, we shouldn't be surprised. Realistically, the process worked to a degree. But the end goal for the process was championship. Philly is not getting a championship no time soon. From the disarray that they've had over the last couple of months or weeks, whatever you want to put it, to just sheer meltdowns in key situations. Mind you, Joel Embiid has gotten beaten in a Game 7 in spectacular fashion. I think this is the second time, maybe even a third time. Once with Kawhi Leonard and now with Jason Tatum, all of which seasons they were expected to make really big noise and go the distance. And it just hasn't happened. And it may be one of those situations where it may be time for him to move on. And no one would actually be against that if in my opinion. Like, realistically, you got to look at everything that Joel Embiid has been through. Did Philly stick with him when he was going through his injuries? Absolutely. But how has he repaid them? In my opinion, he's repaid them by being one of the best big men in the league for the last several years. When he's available, he's absolutely he's a juggernaut. He's a 3-level scorer. You can't do anything with him. And he's maintained and kept Philly on the map as a competitor and contender, rather, for a very long time in recent years. Let's just say that, recent years. And he's gone through the Ben Simmons episode, which, what? Like, honestly, he went through that. And in my opinion, he handled it relatively well. As for a player that it was frustrated with another guy, it was like, hey, dog, just hoop. He handled it well. That happened. That's been 2-3 years away. James Harden comes through. That happened. Now we see where we are. He dealt with the Markelle Fultz issue, where Markelle Fultz was absolutely blaming the Sixers training staff for some of the things that he went through and stuff like that with his injury. It's been a lot of little stuff that's been happening around Joel to the point where you might wonder, it's like, is it time for new scenery? And I think it might be. Now, here's the thing. If he sticks it out, he's a better man than most. Joel is in a situation where, should he have played better in the finals? Yeah. But his career kind of reminds me of a little bit, not saying it mirrors it exactly, of what LeBron was going through in Cleveland. Where he's like, they kept getting to a certain point, and he just couldn't get over the hump. And so he had to change scenery. Now, he's gotten a lot of smoke for it and stuff like that, but at this point, no one's going to bat an eye if Joel Embiid said, you know what? Hey, I'm tired of the BS around here. Y'all ain't got y'all stuff together. Get me a coach. Get me some consistent people. Let's rock. Now, here's the thing. Do I believe that that's the case? No, I don't believe that the Philly doesn't have the talent. I don't believe at all that Philly couldn't have won. I think Philly has talent that's underutilized. Maxey is a star player. Like, he's a starter in he's coming off the bench for James Harden. I don't think that should be happening. Tobias Harris is actually a better player than people give him credit for. He's not utilized right. And not all of that is on Joel Embiid. That's on coaching. That's on organization. People have to understand, you get put into a role on these particular teams. And so I think the pieces are there. They don't have the right coach. But now at this point, they've been through coaches. The Doc Rivers episode is come and gone. Doc was there and then he's gone. Like you as a player, I can see Joel Embiid wanting some consistency with people who are going to show up and ball at a high level like he is. And he has the right to expect that. If I'm playing MVP level basketball to the point where I'm in this conversation the last 3 years, hey, somebody got to ride with me. Somebody has to bring it on a consistent basis. Because when I'm on the floor, you know what you're getting. And as someone who's a fan of the Bulls, as you all know, I am from Chicago. I rep the Bulls all day, every day, no matter what state I'm in, state to state. You know, you get it. Joel Embiid ain't come through Chicago without looking at a 30, 40 plus game. Every time we saw Joel Embiid on the calendar, we said, man, we're going to lose that one. The man's like 12-1 in Chicago. I say all that to say, when he's available, he brings it. Now, mind you, health has always been a thing, and that's been part of the process. But when he's available, he's available. In the last 2 seasons, he has battled through these injuries and not just sat out. So he has been committing himself to winning. Philly has to do a better job in getting the right pieces around him to get them over the hump. And again, it could be how things are managed. Maybe Nick Nurse does do that. But I will say this. I don't think the James Harden trade was beneficial for the 76ers by any stretch of the imagination. Without James Harden, they still, in my opinion, they still would have got to the same place. Now, did James Harden come in and ball out? James Harden came in with double-double. 22 points a game, 10 plus rebounds, led the league in assists. What more do you want? But I will say, I feel like other people on the team took a step back. I think Maxey was hampered, things of that nature. You got to let that kid blossom. So realistically, with all these things and how it's being managed, I can sit there and see Joel Embiid saying, hey, man, listen, I got to roll. I'm valuable enough on the market. I know when my contract comes back up, I'm going to get paid no matter where I go. Hey, where can we go to make this work? I can absolutely see him doing that, especially if this James Harden saga with Daryl Morey doesn't play out the way it went. I can absolutely see that happen. Because, again, we don't know the contract. We don't know what happened exactly. We are all under the impression that James Harden and Daryl Morey had a conversation in which, hey, if you take a little less here, we'll facilitate something in your benefit later. I do believe that happened, but I think one thing people have to keep in mind is that the other teams have to play ball. Nobody wants James Harden. Nobody wants a ball dominant 34-year-old James Harden who's a shell of his former self. The James Harden in Houston, before he forced himself out, that James Harden was worth trading first-round picks and a young star for. Daryl Morey is not going to get that from James Harden. And the way that the money's looking and what James Harden is getting paid, James Harden's getting paid like 30-something million, in between 30 and 40. Star players are getting $60 million a year. James Harden is not garnering, or, well, realistically, it kind of depends on what James Harden wants. James Harden's on the last year of his deal. If you trade for James Harden, what type of deal is he going to want? What is that going to look like? What does it take to get James Harden to, former James? All of that is questions you have to ask. And that may not be something Philly it can do, because the league, other teams have to want that contract. And so now that puts Philly in a rock and a hard place. I do not believe Daryl Morey tried to do James Harden dirty. Now, if news comes out and that's not the case, I will get on the same platform I said it on. I'll get back on and say I was wrong. But I'm just saying, from the outside looking in, not having that inside information, I don't believe that. I think the market is finally telling the league is finally telling James Harden, you're not worth what you think you are. And the antics, we're done with that. And the new CBA, kind of, we're done with that. Everything that's been going on the last 5, 6, 7 years, that's done. We're done with that. That's not happening anymore. And so I look at that and I say, hey, all of that tension and stuff like that, how does that impact your star player who just wants people to come and hoop? He may be getting out there. Now, I'm going to end this on this note because, again, I do want to hear your comments, man. I know that you all will have a lot to say, especially if you're in Philly. I don't want Joel Embiid to leave Philly. I've been Before I was my secondary team outside of the Bulls was Philly. I was an AI fan, huge AI fan. I was really big on the Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid tandem. I thought that they had a chance to do it. I really wanted to see Philly actually get a championship. Like there's certain organizations I feel like really deserved one. I feel like Philly has always been in the mix, but never really got it. And even so, they don't even get respected as champions because they did win one in the 80s. No one talks about. Like, I think that that's one of the things where I would love to see that city win a championship. I think it would be the best thing, one of the best things for basketball if Philly was able to reclaim a NBA title in a modern era. That would be golden. I feel like that city would go nuts. It'll be amazing, things of that nature. So I really have always rooted for the organization. But I gotta tell you, man, there's some. This is one of those things where I see Joel Embiid on the move, and this is who I ultimately think he can be on the move too. There's going to be several teams that are going to be looking to retool, rebuild, and put people around them, and I can actually see teams with the high draft capital. You got to keep your eye on what Utah was doing, how they've built that. And if you really look at their roster, I think they got Colin Sexton over there, Laurie Marketing. I think Clarkson is still there. They got enough pieces where they're probably one star away from making real noise in the West. And I can see them using all their draft capital, some of the young players, to actually make an enticing deal. I could see Joel Embiid probably even getting in on the Dame and Portland situation. I'm not saying that should, but you have to think now if this comes out and Joel is trying to force it, like where do you go to get the pieces and the draft capital? You know, Celtics. I highly doubt the Celtics, are even in that thing. They've already got Kristaps, stuff like that. I think they're pretty much set. But if they did make any move, you got to look at it again. Celtics have the pieces to actually entice something like that to happen. I would love to sit there and say, oh, here, come to Chicago. I highly doubt he ever comes to Chicago. I don't think we have anything that they would even want to even make that happen. And last but not least, if they do it right, I can see Joel Embiid in the Lakers jersey. I hate to say it, but for some odd reason, big men who leave the East somehow, some way find themselves in a Lakers jersey. Going all the way back to Shaq, and even before then, people forget. I don't know if it was by trade or by just contract, however it was. But Lou Alcindor, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, he won a championship with the Bucks at first. Ended up in a Lakers jersey. Most of the legendary big men ended up in a Lakers jersey or a Celtics jersey. I can see him going to another story franchise like that. And those are the type of teams and cities that would embrace and want someone like Joel Troll Embiid. But I want to hear your thoughts, man. I don't want this to be one of those videos in which I just solely talked and put this doom and gloom on it. But I just wanted to bring the reality of it. We have to sit there and put that on it. This is going to up. If he requests a trade, it just got real. And now we have Dame, Joel Embiid, James Harden, all looking for a new home, trying to force themselves into a different situation. And I think Dame and Joel would definitely deserve it. James, I don't know what the heck is going on, but I want to hear your thoughts, man. Whether it's love, whether it's hate, put it in the chat. I'll be in there with you. Till next time. Peace.